Well, welcome back to the Regent Law Podcast. I'm really excited about today's episode. Today we have Nathan McGrath, who is the President and General Counsel of the Fairness Center here in Harrisburg, PA. Nathan, thanks for coming.
Well, thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I say thanks for coming kind of in a cheeky way because
I guess I blew your surprise there on that.
Because I came. Normally we have the show at Regent Law School. And actually, Nathan came last year and we recorded that, but we kind of had a recording mess up. And so he invited me to come to the Fairness Center here in Pennsylvania. And I got to tell you, it's a really cool location. We're right across from the Capitol. And thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming up here. We're excited to have you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really beautiful. So on today's episode, we're going to learn about Nathan. He's a 2010 graduate of the law school, as well as a lot about the Fairness Center.
Great.
So, Nathan, how long have you been here at the Fairness Center?
Well, I actually came to the Fairness Center in 2016. So my lawyer math tells me correctly, going into 9 years. So
Wow.
Yeah.
As you kind of alluded to earlier, math is not your strongest, but I think you nailed it.
8 years going on 9, something like that.
Yeah. So 9 years here at the Fairness Center. You graduated from law school in 2010.
Yep.
So I'm just going to get straight to it. The Fairness Center, what you guys do is you guys are a public interest law firm, nonprofit.
Yep.
That specializes in workers' rights, correct?
Yeah, we really help folks when public sector union officials basically violate their legal rights. So these can be constitutional rights, which is a big part of our caseload. So we end up in federal court protecting people's First Amendment rights, which is really exciting because, like if you don't have your First Amendment right, then what do we have here in this country?
Absolutely.
So that's really fun. And then we also help folks when the union hasn't represented them properly, or one of my personal favorites, which is union corruption, because then we get into lots of discovery. People get arrested sometimes. Like it's a party. So I really enjoy the variety of work, everything from high-level federal circuit court arguments to state court, doing, depositions, getting hundreds of thousands of documents, pulling late night hours to try to find that credit card transaction that, shows, oh, they bought a $12,000 Rolex watch, or this person was paid hush money, or, that type of stuff. So all things that have happened in our cases.
Honestly, this sounds like a dream job for a lot of people like who go to law school. Mm-hmm. But I have the feeling that maybe even you probably didn't know that this exact job existed, right?
Oh, no, not at all. I always say we are the firm that people come to be a lawyer, because being nonprofit and public interest, while we keep track of time for certain reasons, attorney's fees, those types of things, you really get to dig in deep into the law. You could research something for 2 weeks and you'll never have your time cut or anything like that, because we want to win. And our clients are getting representation for free, so they're not going to yell at you for researching something for 2 weeks and finding the key to winning their case. And so you really get to grapple with the law, be an excellent attorney, and you get to do something that there's really only 20 to 30 of us attorneys in the country who do what we do. So
really?
Oh, yeah. You totally have to kind of stumble into this, which was my route. I was in private practice in Pittsburgh after law school, and ended up truly just kind of stumbling into my first job in this area at National Right to Work. Ended up doing a lot of federal class action litigation there, had a national practice, and just fell in love with representing our clients who, in private practice, sometimes you're kind of like, oh man, I don't like who I'm representing, but it's my job and it's our ethical duty and we're called to do that.
Right.
But what I've discovered in this area of law, now that I've been practicing this type of law since 2012, actually, most of my career, I've never woken up a day and been like, oh man, I'm on the wrong side of this.
Wow.
My client really actually did it. I'm just trying to get them out of it. They're the ones who are always injured, and we are truly fighting for a good and noble cause for them.
Wow. So I want to back up here. We have a lot of to be students considering law school? Well, we have alumnus of the law school as well as lawyers across the country who listen to the show or watch it. But I think we have a lot of students considering law school that check out our show that are thinking about Regent Law. So you were once a law student applying to law school. Were you thinking that you would be in a job like this?
No, I mean, if you would have told me I was going to do public interest law, first of all, I would have said, I don't even know what that is.
Exactly, right?
But that sounds horrible. I don't want to do that. I want to work in a big firm, have great resources, be able to provide for my family, and not be in the basement cellar with a light bulb above my head.
So you had an idea. You had an idea of, some people come to law school, they watched a movie, they want to fight for justice, they don't really know much of what's going on. But you had an idea of big law. You had an idea in mind, wanted to make a certain amount of money, and this was not that. You would have said, no, that's what I'm going for.
Yeah, I mean, just some type of law firm, the traditional route, I would say. Like, I wasn't interested in being a prosecutor, wasn't interested in being public defender, wasn't interested in government. I was going to go to a private practice and a law firm, the traditional thing that people think of when they think of an attorney.
Did you kind of maintain that through the 3 years?
Yeah, because I didn't really know any difference. Like I said, I didn't really even find out the public interest world existed really until 2 years into my private practice. I was just starting to think like, man, I don't think this is it. Like, I enjoyed my cases. I had some really interesting cases. For instance, adverse possession was one of my favorite concepts in property, where everyone said, you'll never get to use that.
I loved it too.
Yeah, like, I loved adverse possession. I'm such a weirdo, but I did. And in my first year of practice, we got to defend and to try to go and claim adverse possession for clients. And I remember Professor DeGraff, who I think's still there with property.
Absolutely.
I think I emailed him and was like, you'll never guess what case I just had. And so it was fun. I enjoyed generally the practice of law, but I just started getting kind of restless for, I think there's something else. And so when I came across this area of public interest where you could do really high-end litigation, like complex, tough litigation against really good big firms around the country, where I was originally and where I am now. We're well-resourced, well-staffed. We have everything at our disposal. If you need a private investigator, we get a private investigator. One case, we brought in a forensic accountant because we had to put the pieces together for money that was missing, those types of things. That's the type of law firm I wanted to work for. And I didn't know that it would have existed outside of, the traditional law firm that you would think of. And so that's why I've just been so delighted to commit my practice to this area and in two places now that are really well resourced and can bring to bear the type of heavy weight that I wanted to for my clients.
Wow. So it sounds like you found your dream job that you didn't even know existed.
Yeah, pretty much.
What might you say to, let's say, a first or second year associate or someone, maybe even a little bit farther than that in their law career, who's just asking questions? Maybe they don't hate their job, but they're just thinking there's something more. What can you think back to that part of your journey? Do you have any advice for maybe how to navigate that, what perspective to have, or maybe it just kind of more happened to you? I'd love to hear any thoughts you have on that.
Yeah, I mean, so it kind of just happened to me. I'm not advocating that for how you go about your life, but that is kind of what happened for me. The next door just opened. The next step was just taken. I think in looking back, as far as advice goes, I would really be proactive in connecting with lawyers because the term attorney or lawyer, people think they know what you do, but I mean, it can get so minute and niche that it's
Right.
about like a lawyer knows one section of the code and that's all they do all their life, or patent attorneys are they're really specialized in an area. We're not supposed to say specialized, but we're very experienced in an area. Sorry, but I think that I would really use my time building relationships and just saying, hey, can I take you out to lunch or dinner, and just ask them questions about their practice and what they've done, because maybe they're practicing, maritime law, but maybe they started out doing personal injury at one point, and so they can give you a perspective
Right.
of a couple different areas of practice. And I think that's where you grow, you expand, and you find out all the things that you actually don't know.
Interesting. Or maybe you're doing maritime law and this other person's doing maritime law, but you're like, they look pretty happy, or they have a really unique skill set that, you learn how they do maritime is very different than you, or
Yeah.
you're in one niche on a team and they
Yeah.
do it.
I mean, I think one big opportunity that gets passed up, I will often tell students I meet with or younger attorneys, like, hey, give me a call, stop by my office, I'll take you out to lunch. I'll connect you with people, I'll chat, with you for hours if you want about your career, because, people did that for me. I want to be able to do that for other people. I can't tell you exactly how many, but I think it's only like 2 or 3 people have ever taken me up on that
Wow.
offer. And I think it's ended up working out really well for them because I've been able to help connect them and jobs and those types of things. But like when people give you that offer, like they typically, probably 80% of the time, actually really mean it. Like some are just throwing it out there for sure. But like the people who actually mean it, like take them up on it. Like
Yeah.
that is a wealth of knowledge and opportunity and connections that you can't tap into on your own. And they already are years ahead of you. Like take them up. It's such a simple thing, and it sounds dumb, but I've said it for years now, and 2 or 3 people maybe that have ever taken me up on it.
That's really incredible. I think
Yeah.
that's really good advice for law students as well.
Yeah.
Any chance they can get to connect with a practicing attorney, frankly, doesn't have to be an attorney, someone successful in their business, or could be a mentor at church or something.
Right.
That's a really interesting point that you say you've invited so many people and very few have taken you up on it. I wonder why
Yeah.
that is.
Yeah. I mean, it's shocking to me, and whether I don't know. I don't know why it is, but maybe I now will get flooded with people. I don't know, but it's really a genuine offer because people have done that for me in the past, and I've seen what it's done for my career. I'm happy to pass that down to those who aren't quite there in their career yet.
Wow, that's a really great perspective. Um, well, let's dive into the Fairness Center a little
Sure.
bit. So you said it's a public interest law firm. Can you tell? You already gave a little synopsis, but what's at the heartbeat of the type of cases you take?
Yeah, I mean, really simply put, if a public sector union official violates your rights, we're your place. And so we've represented public officials, we've represented um, public employees, both union members and non-members. We've represented membership organizations where their rights have been violated by union officials, and so the organization has brought a lawsuit on their behalf. So it can be a lot of different people who end up being our clients. And at the end of the day, it's basically having public sector union officials not violate the law. And so I often tell people, if union officials don't break the law, we would have nothing to do because we truly only show up when they violate someone's rights.
Wow. I'm from a state that's less union heavy. So for the listeners that are not super familiar with this area of law or not super familiar with unions, especially if they're younger students, you know, when I think about unions, I think, well, the only reason a person would be in a union is because that union is going to negotiate on their behalf.
Yeah.
So interesting that the whole of what you do is try to enforce that.
Yeah, I mean, we could get real down in the weeds. We won't. But I mean, the typical scenario is you live in a state where collective bargaining is authorized, and say you work for a public university, and the union, University Union One is the local union that is there, and they are what's called your exclusive representative, and they are the only ones that get to speak on your behalf to your employer. And that's whether you're a union member or not a union member, merely because you're employed there. Because you're part of what's called a bargaining unit. And so a bargaining unit would be like all university professors. So you're a university professor, you show up and you're given a contract, and you're told, these are your terms and conditions of employment. This is what you'll make over the next 20 years that you're here. These are your days you get off or whatever. And you're like, well, wait a second. I didn't agree to that. And they say, don't worry. We agreed to it for you because we're your exclusive rep. And you say, well, I want to go talk to my employer about that. I think I'm a pretty good professor. I think I should get a raise. They say, no, you don't get to. We're the only ones that get to talk to your employer for that. And so you start to see like, oh man, like my terms and conditions of employment I don't own that. The union owns that for me, and you have to accept whatever they choose to negotiate for you. And that's whether you're a union member or not a union member. And so, of course, most people do join the union, and but it's the same across the board for all these. So like a typical constitutional type case we'll get is, for instance, we had a teacher here in Pennsylvania that she found out that she's a public school teacher, and she found out that the Pennsylvania State Teachers Association was sending money from Pennsylvania teacher money to Wisconsin to recall the governor of Wisconsin. It was back in the day. Perhaps you recall Governor Scott Walker was doing labor reform out there. Well, all the unions of the country decided they wanted to jump in on that and try to recall him and do all these types of things. So Pennsylvania also sent money over there, and she found out about that, and she said, well, wait a second. She's like, what is my money doing going to Wisconsin to recall a governor that doesn't really impact me, my kids, or my school, or anything like that? And so she wanted to get out of the union and not pay the union for anything, because she really felt like, well, my money's really being like misused in that way. That's against what I want. And so typical case for us would be, someone discovers something like that. They want to get out of the union, and the union says, nope, you have to be a member of the union. And at that point, your constitutional rights, freedom of speech, freedom of association, come into play, because now they're using your money to basically speak for you and represent you against your will for things that you disagree with. And so that's a typical kind of scenario that we would get involved with. And there's lots of litigation going up through the federal courts and at the Supreme Court even on those types of issues.
Now, there was I say recent case, wasn't it like in 18 or 19, you guys wrote an amicus brief? Was it part of...
Oh, the Janus case. Yeah, the Janus decision. So Mark Janus was Illinois. He was a public employee in Illinois, and he was not a part of the union. And back before that decision, the law was, well, you don't have to be part of the union and pay full union dues, but if you're not part of the union, you still have to pay the union a certain amount of money because they're, quote unquote, representing you.
Sure sounds like being in the union.
Yeah. I mean, well, and let's set aside the fact that the unions chose this situation. They could choose to only represent members who pay them money, but they don't want that. They want to represent everybody, members and non-members. Right. And so, and the courts have written about why that gives them great power and authority and all these types of things. But anyway, so Mark said, well, I'm not a union member. I don't agree with what you do. I think this is a violation of my First Amendment right. And he went up to the Supreme Court. We had clients who were litigating this exact same type of case. Actually, our case was a little bit behind them in the courts. And so when his cert petition was granted by the U.S. Supreme Court, we actually wrote a brief on their behalf to say, hey, this is happening. over here too, and to kind of tell their stories to give some extra support. But yeah, Mark won his case, and basically the rule now for the country that came out of that is if you're not a union member, but if you're in a bargaining unit that is represented by a public sector union, you don't have to pay them fees anymore, basically. So,
but now still in play is representation, right?
Yeah, so the representation issue is still in play. So we had a case recently where we had professors up at a city university in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
5 of them are Jewish professors,
Right.
and their union represents all 30,000 professors of the city university system. And you can imagine you can't usually get 10 people to agree on an issue, let alone 30,000.
Yeah.
So when this union speaks, it's often, saying something that somebody doesn't like. But
Right.
this union did something particularly egregious in our client's eyes, where they came out with a pro-Palestine resolution, and they kind of doubled down after the October 7 issue or the tragedy,
Event.
actually,
Yeah.
not just an issue, but
Yeah.
a tragedy. And so, like I said, 5 of our clients there were Jewish. And so they were saying to resign from the union and not have to pay the union dues is not enough, because we're still represented by this
Right.
union. They still say they speak for us on our terms and conditions of employment. And, oh, by the way, they're also saying they want to institute like BDS, the boycott, divest, and sanction stuff on campus. And we've actually seen around the country where unions are even trying to negotiate that into contracts. So even that type of political issue is making its way into terms and conditions of employment. It's not just the union speaking separately on political issues. And so they had a real problem with this. And so that's why they brought their case, which was to say, it's not enough. We want an extra step taken. We want to totally disaffiliate from the union and not be represented by them at all. We would rather not be represented completely than to have this union
Right.
represent us, because they are literally against who we are, what we stand for, our faith, our country, all these types of things.
Yeah. The ability to represent is not there.
Yeah. They don't have any opportunity to represent themselves, and so we just see this happening around the country, where the anti-Semitism thing has really become big.
Right.
I'm shocked actually by what's happening in this country because of that case I was telling you about. It's called the Goldstein case.
Right.
We started fielding a lot of calls around the country from other employees who felt like their union was taking very anti-Semitic stances and discriminating against them based off of just being Jewish and Zionists and those types of things. And so we've really kind of started collecting a fair number of clients.
Wow.
Sadly, like, this is a huge issue. And one of my colleagues who often takes these calls, she's come out before and been like, this has to be what Germany was like,
Wow.
where all these things are happening. At some point, someone's got to say no and start pushing back on this, because it's completely wrong.
Right. Thank you for doing this. It's really wonderful. I'm thinking about so many law students who come and they want to defend the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they don't really have any idea what kind of job could come from that.
Right.
They think about a Supreme Court case and they picture themselves fighting for those rights, but they don't think about how's this going to work. I mean, just one simple matter is, constitutional matters are not money makers, right?
Yeah.
So what type of job does this come from? And I don't think thinking through the lens of labor unions is an option that most law students would think about at all.
Yeah, I always say our area of law is where labor and the Constitution collide, basically. You have 2 different bodies of law, but when they hit, as many of our cases do, you have implications on First Amendment rights. So,
Wow. So, the Fairness Center, you guys are located here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Um, you have clients all over the country.
yeah, we are. So our flagship office is here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. We operate in New York and Connecticut and Pennsylvania, obviously, and Colorado. And then we have other cases right now we're handling in California and Florida. And then we also represent federal government employees, and that kind of takes us all over the country.
Oh,
So, yeah, so we have a pretty national practice in a lot of ways.
So you've got a national practice. You're doing this really exciting work. You are the president and the general counsel. It sounds like you probably wear a lot of hats
Sure.
for the Fairness
And I'm a
Center.
great barista. We really love our coffee here.
We just had a great latte.
Yeah. We love our coffee, and I love making drinks for the staff and our guests, and it's a fun little side job for me. Yeah.
So, in all seriousness, though, once again, I'm thinking about law students who are thinking about, I want to be a lawyer. So you get to practice really cool law. How much of your job currently is law, and how much is, let's say, leadership, and how much is barista?
Well, barista's pretty big. No. Well, actually, it is. Yeah. I would say now I'm starting as I've taken over the firm, as we've scaled up. We had a really exciting summer of hiring. Actually, we had a partner from K&L Gates. He had been there 19 years. He actually decided to come and join us as our managing partner.
Wow.
And so that was a big get for us, and we really saw him as starting to kind of cycle in as like the top day-to-day lawyer, kind of handling all the fires that pop up, because as I've shifted into more management, and it's a nonprofit public interest law firm, I've got to raise the funds to keep us going. So a lot of fundraising, firm management, those types of things. We needed a good attorney just to be like the day-to-day, hey, you've got to file a brief tomorrow sort of thing. And instead of pulling me off now, he's able to do that. So my litigation load has sadly started to decrease, but I would still say I touch litigation things every day to a certain extent. Next week we're going to have 2 days of hearings, and I'm going to be in those, and representing the clients, doing directs and crosses, those types of things. So
that's cool.
Yeah, so I still get to do that.
You think you'll stay in it for as long as you can? You always have one.
Yeah, I'm a lawyer at heart. I'm a litigator at heart. So yeah, to pull me fully out, I think I'd be a sad person. So
right.
Yeah, but it definitely is shifting a lot more to firm management and
vision
fundraising,
and
that type of stuff. Yep. Just hiring, recruiting is I think that's one thing that I underestimated about taking over this position, which was you're always on the hunt for good talent, and just building relationships, and especially with the very specific area of law we do, you have to have lawyers that aren't just plug and play lawyers. Like, it's not, oh, just recycle that complaint. It's oftentimes, this is a fully new fact pattern. How are you going to help the client? Well, maybe you're going to have to research for 3 weeks to figure out, oh, this cause of action works. And, something that hasn't been used since, the 50s or something like that. And
wow.
So it really takes an attorney that isn't just a plug and play attorney, but really wants to think creatively, wants to be outside the box, but has really good practical skills, because you can be a big thinker, but can you actually then put it down on paper and bring it into a complaint and get your case filed? And so not only do we have to find those types of attorneys, but then you have to find the type of attorney that wants to do the type of work that we do. And so there's a lot of things that have to happen, which means a lot of network building for me, a lot of talent scouting, those types of things.
Wow. Where would you say you've learned the skills to do your job well?
I'd say there's some colleagues who run other organizations that here and there I've bumped into, that I've been able to pick their brain a little bit, and they've been very generous with their time and ability that way. I would say that my my leadership team, we've just kind of put our heads down and said, all right, here's the new mountain. How do we climb it? And a lot of it has been just figured out.
Yeah.
And we just have a real belief in our mission, and we have a clear vision, and we just go and get it.
Oh, that's really cool. I love these stories, as I know law students and maybe even attorneys who are dreaming about other careers are listening, and I'm hearing a theme of honestly networking and learning from others. You're inviting younger attorneys. It sounds like you say. So I just heard you say you're learning from others currently who are leading organizations. I heard you say you're inviting younger attorneys anytime that they want to chat who aren't taking you up on it very much. But also you said earlier that the journey here just kind of fell into your lap. Was that through a relationship as well?
Yeah, actually it was. Did you know that? I don't know
No.
if you knew that. Okay,
No.
yeah, no, it was. And it was actually a regional law relationship. So when I decided I kind of wanted to start looking for something new, I emailed a old professor I had at Regent Law, Bruce Cameron.
Bruce Cameron.
Yeah, Bruce Cameron. And all I knew at the time really with him was that he had a national practice. And I thought, well, if I'm looking for something new, I'm always up for an adventure. I don't mind moving somewhere. And so let me talk to a guy who's had a national practice and just see, does he know anyone's hiring or what's out there? And so I emailed Bruce, and he got back to me quite quickly that a colleague of his had just resigned that day.
Wow. That day.
At that day at National Right to Work, the Legal Defense Foundation part of it. And he thought I'd be an excellent fit and I should send in my resume. And that was a Thursday. So I did Thursday night. I just kind of was like, okay, I don't know what these guys do. I'm really not sure what I'm doing, but this is the first step. And so I did. And Friday morning, I was basically offered the job. And by Monday, the next week, I was sealed and ready to go. And I still didn't really know what I was going to do as far as like, what kind of law do you practice? What are our resources? Anything like that. But I just
Were you still in your other job?
Yeah, I was still in my other firm. And so it happened really quickly, and made a good transition, though, out of the other firm, and started very quickly. And I remember my first day I walked in, and there was a mound of discovery on my desk for a federal class action in the Southern District of Ohio. And I had a note from the senior attorney on the case that said, I'll be in a few hours, familiarize yourself with this. We've got to respond in 2 weeks. And I was like, this is awesome. I still don't know what I'm doing, but this sounds great. So
and my name's Bob. Or whatever.
Yeah. And so it was off and running from there. And it was about almost 5 great years there. And I learned so much. And then, this job was total networking too. The guy who kind of started and ran this organization first, he had met me actually a couple years before he started recruiting me. He met me when they first started the Fairness Center up. They had come down to Right to Work to just kind of introduce themselves and talk to them. And
right.
And I think by luck, really, ended up going to lunch with him. And I remember I had a brief due, and I was kind of like, all right, let's hustle this up because I got to go write a brief. And then about a year or two later, he started slowly just kind of pitching me and like, hey, would you be interested? And so that door eventually opened, and that's how I found my way up here. So yeah, I mean, it's all been really networking and personal relationships, those types of things.
Right.
Yeah.
Doors opening that you weren't expecting.
Totally not expecting. Yeah.
I assume, though, a lot of preparation went into skills so that you're ready to walk through those doors when they opened.
Yeah. I mean, whatever you're doing, you should do it with absolute excellence, with a lot of intensity, and then you'll be ready to take on the next challenge that comes.
Right. So earlier you said it just kind of happened to me. So there's actually some advice there, right? As you can be trying to open a bunch of doors for yourself and looking and doing all this, but where you're at, if it's not perfect, but maybe not horrible. One option could be to do it really excellent, to pick up the skills necessary for the next season that you may not even know is going to be an option.
Yeah, I mean, I think just generally my philosophy is whatever you're doing, you should do really excellently. Whether, like I grew up building houses with my dad's construction company.
Oh, really?
I was in steel mills, all sorts of stuff. Like whatever I did it really well. And I remember being the boss's kid. Everyone's like, "Oh, the boss's kid." Well,
Yeah.
we went into the steel mill. I remember this one time, and I won't say what the steel mill was, but they had not cleaned their floors in a long time. And our crew went in. My dad looked around, and he was a big stickler for cleanliness and leaving everything better than when you got there. And he looked around and he said, "Well, Nathan, actually what you're going to do for the week is you're going to clean their floor for them." And he gave me a shovel, and it was like years of insulation and fire break. I mean, like it was
Black dust.
Oh man, yeah, it was. I probably like got cancer there. Who knows? But I mean, it was so bad. And so for that week, I was like, my job is to take about 1.5 feet of who knows what, maybe dead bodies, I don't know, off the floor and make it look amazing. And that was my job for that week. But, I think I tackled that just as hard as I did anything else. And I think that gets noticed, that stands out. And, when I'm recruiting, when I'm looking for talent, I'm looking at how are they doing everything, all the little things. It's really easy to shine and do your best when people are watching you. What are you doing when people aren't watching you? Right. Some of my favorite stories of our staff here at this firm are the things that no one will ever know, that I've seen or I've been told about by other staffers. Like, hey, did you know so-and-so did X? Did you know so-and-so stayed late and did Y? Those types of things. That to me means a ton, and that's why I'll go to the mat for my people here.
Oh, that's wonderful. Where do you think it sounds like your dad obviously put that in you, developed some work ethic, excellence, because he didn't have to care about the floors and the steel mill.
He did not, and maybe some would say should not.
Yeah. Was it mostly him?
I would say dad and mom, both of them. I I don't know. She'll kill me for telling this, but I remember in college, I took a biz law class and loved it. It was great, and I got my exam back, and I got a 99 out of 100. Got 99 of the 100 questions correct, and I was like, she'll be proud of this. So I called home on that one. I was like, Mom, got 99 out of 100, A+. What do you think? And she's like, well, why'd you miss the one? And I was like, why did I miss the one? What about the 99? And she's like, well, but why'd you miss the one? And I'm like, I don't know. And she said, are you going to go ask your professor about that? I'm like, I am not. And she's like, but aren't you curious? And like, I'm not curious, actually. And, again, just like the do everything well, do your best, put everything you have into it, excellence, that type of thing. I would say on both sides of it, my sister and I got it pretty hard.
Wow.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
So that would lead to pretty strong lawyer traits and working traits. You have any hobbies? You're running this law firm, and it's
staying alive. That's kind of the hobby. I enjoy golf when I can. My wife and I actually run another 501c3 organization. It is a educational resource organization that really allows homeschooling families who want to learn how to teach a classical education model to their kids. We have employees who help them with that and materials. We actually have 3 campuses right now.
Wow.
I think the latest number I heard, we're at like 240 kids, and they come together, and our employees, we have about 30 of them, almost 35, and every week they're teaching the parents and the kids about like a new concept in Latin or geography or whatever, and then they send them home with the resources to teach it for that week, and then they come back the next week and kind of learn the next concept. And it's an amazing, really awesome program. It's a really neat way that we can come beside families who, have picked a classical education model for their kids. But, let's be honest, for me, it'd be math. Other people, it might be Latin. Like some of these things you really want your kids to have a great education and to be really strong in it. But I mean, like, where do you start? You don't know how to do that. And then in
Right.
a classical system, that's, another layer on top. And so our organization, can help families in this really region at this point now. Between our 3 campuses, to have the parents' dream of being able to do that, and the kids come out with just solid educations.
What's the name of the 501c3?
Yeah, so it's kind of long. It's the Central Pennsylvania Classical Education Resource Alliance. We've shortened it to the acronym CERA, and I'm told in Latin it would be pronounced Sarah. So
okay.
that's what we call it. We call it Sarah.
And that's all in PA.
Right now, yep. Yeah, it's
Cool.
in Pennsylvania. So
You told me earlier you were homeschooled, and I assume you had a classical education there as well.
actually I didn't. I was homeschooled, but I don't know that the classical model was really out in the marketplace. When I was homeschooling, I was the first homeschooler in the district.
There we go.
In our school district. So they didn't really know what to do with me. My mom, we had recently moved away from Pittsburgh into this kind of small rural community up in Northwest PA. And she had multiple master's degrees and these types of things. But she really saw the move as an opportunity to do her lifelong dream, which was to homeschool her kid. So we get there and they're kind of like, we don't know what to do. And so she ended up through that being able to be kind of the consultant to the school district, and years and years now into it, she's still helping facilitate, families going from the public school to homeschooling to the public school. They still rely on her
Wow.
for lots of stuff. She does evaluations, which is something in Pennsylvania. Not in all states, but Pennsylvania is pretty regulated. But you have to get an evaluation by a licensed person at the end of the year. So she does that for homeschooling families. But she really blazed the trail in our district, and I am so proud of her, and kind of her, and then the folks that came after her. The Titusville School District, at least last I knew, was one of the most open school districts to homeschoolers, to the point that, hey, if you're homeschooling and you don't feel you can teach chemistry, your kid can go to the public school and just take the chemistry class. They can play on the football team or the soccer team or whatever. Yeah, they have really learned to work together in the best interest of the kid to get the complete education that really, at the end of the day, the parent wants to provide for their child. So it's fantastic.
I'm super interested in so much of what you're saying. I've got 3 kids. We're homeschooling right now. I had a different route. I was public school education, and now I work at Regional Law School, so work at a institution of higher learning. I'm education as a whole right now is kind of experiencing a lot of disruption, and I think even more is obviously coming with AI. So you, it sounds like, had a really good homeschool education. You went to Grove City, right?
I did,
which is a great school, undergrad, and then you came to Regional Law School, which we're both big fans of.
Absolutely.
What I appreciated about Regent Law School, because I would not say most of my education up to Regent Law was that stellar. It was good. I learned a bit, but I came at 38 to law school, and the level of learning at Regent Law that I experienced, at least, was incredible. I fell in love with learning. I don't know if it was just a really good school or I specifically liked learning how to think like a lawyer. I think it's the latter. I really loved thinking like a lawyer. It changes the way I prepare a sermon for church, or by the way I think through problems in life in general. I'd love to hear from your perspective, maybe some advice for someone who's thinking about law school but doesn't necessarily exactly know what to do with it. Maybe just because they didn't have lawyers in their family.
Right.
You said you didn't know about public interest. Maybe they have it in their mind. They can think of 1 or 2 lawyer jobs. What would you say is the benefit of a good legal education?
Yeah, so there's two schools of thought, right? Don't go to law school unless you have a specific thing you want to do with your degree. A lot of people will say that, and I think there's some value to that.
Yeah,
Um,
especially if you're going to take on debt.
yeah, if you're going to take on a lot of debt and you just did it, for fun, or you just were like, well, that's just the next step. So I think there's maybe some wisdom in that advice. But what I have told people is that what I've really appreciated about law school and a legal education is that at the very least, at the bottom of it, it teaches you a lot about just how the world works.
Yeah,
You learn,
totally agree.
I mean, just so many things. I remember going through law school and, doing business transactions or UCC or something like that. I was like, oh, that's why that happens. Or just the philosophy of the law and why, we assign liability to certain things in a certain way, or we don't, and it just made life make so much more sense. I understood things so much better. So I think, and I think it can really launch you into being an effective educator, business person, communicator. I think there's just so many things that a law degree can be an amazing platform to jump off of. You don't have to be a traditional lawyer. You don't even have to come do what I do.
Right.
It can prepare you for and give you just such a good base for so many different things in life.
Problem solving, navigating complex, honestly, conversations. I feel like I'm a better elder at my church now by the way I look at a problem and all the people involved. I couldn't agree more. I like the way you said it. I think if you're going to take on a lot of debt and you really don't know what the finish line is, the more those things are, the more cautious you should be with law school. But if you can get a scholarship, if there's good reason to think that you could use your degree, or if you just have an extreme hunger, I would for sure look into it. And of course, I would say check out Regent Law School.
I would too.
What would you say? Pure self-promotion for the law school here.
Yeah, sure.
What would
Let's go
you
for it.
say? What was your we don't have to go super deep here. What was your experience at Regent Law? What did you enjoy about it? Because it's a very unique kind of law school.
Yeah. I mean, I would say first thing that I've noticed being out of the law school is when I talk about my experiences there, I regularly hear from other people like, well, that was not my experience. I hated law school. I actually loved law school.
Yeah, me too.
I think it was for a couple of reasons. I think hands down, professors were phenomenal. They became friends. There was an open door policy. I think the school, I don't know if they still do this, but they even incentivized like spending time with the students and teaching the law and not being so taken away by individual academic pursuits,
Right.
and I think that really mattered because at the end of the day, you're about giving a great education. And
Right.
so I think the professors were phenomenal. I still have good friends down there now. And when I do come down to visit, I end up, going out for a meal or whatever.
Right.
So that has been a real treasure. I think the other thing was the actual education was fantastic. I mean, I'm totally biased on this, but
Yeah, and what if some
you know.
people say, "Oh, it's a smaller school or somewhat newer. How could that be true? Why would it be better than another school?"
Yeah, well, I think that actually makes it better in the sense that we had something to prove. Like when I was there, I
Right.
think we were around 25 years old. Like you're still new, up and coming. If you have people failing the bar, if you have people getting out and becoming terrible attorneys and no one wants to hire you, that's a real problem. And the school, I think, just so emphasized you are here to learn the law and to be great lawyers. Like that is why you're here. That is what we're here to do.
Yep.
And totally, stories, but I've been telling stories the whole time, so
Yeah.
why not? I remember doing law review at the Barbary stuff after I graduated up in Pittsburgh, and so
Like bar prep.
yeah, the bar prep, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, and so you go every day, hopefully every day,
And you're there with law
Yeah.
students who've
From-
just graduated from a bunch of schools
all over the country,
who are taking the PA bar.
exactly, and like name your law school, they were there, and almost every day, maybe but definitely at least every
For
week.
2 months or something.
Yeah, there would be a concept introduced, and for me it's like, oh yeah, I remember that. And it was truly just bar review, and someone would be leaning over to me and be like, have you ever heard of this before? And I'd be like, yeah, that's like a really fundamental, thing. And it just like blew my mind away that like, why hadn't you heard of this before during your education? And as this continued to happen and happen, I was just like, wow, I really appreciate the education I got at Regent. The bar review was truly just a review. It wasn't a big deal. And the bar didn't feel overwhelming at all. And I think that Regent has pushed out a lot of really good students that graduated past the bar and were really ready to practice. We obviously had a lot to learn. I still learn all the time.
Yeah.
But we had the tools, the mentality, and the education behind us that we could become really good lawyers.
That's awesome. Wow. I appreciate all the stories. Totally agree. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
This has been a really fun time. If listeners want to know more about the Fairness Center, where might they go to do that?
I think our website's probably the easiest. Is fairnesscenter.org, and it talks all about our cases, our staff, where we are. You'll get a pretty good insight into who we are there.
Well, fantastic. Hope you guys enjoy the show. Check out the Fairness Center with Nathan McGrath.